All of you who don't know me, my name is Tara Malarkey, and I'm super excited you're here. What I do is I help female leaders, female coaches, female divine, feminine, purpose-driven women who want to grow their business so that they can make a bigger impact in the world and create more financial freedom for both themselves and then the impact they can make with the ripple effect of that. My students, my clients have gone on to, really go from zero, from being disempowered in their heart and in their mind and what they thought was possible for them. And they've gone on to have multi-six-figure businesses, which I'm super proud of. Most of them have gone on to, be between 240 or 250,000 a year to 500,000 a year. And while so many of us kind of have like a murky relationship with this conversation around money, I really think it's important because I believe embodied spiritual women need to become really wealthy. That's what we actually came here for. It's one of the things that we came here to deliver our destiny, and without resources, without financial resources, we can't do that. And so that's what I feel really empowered by. Most of my students are relationship and intimacy coaches, they're health coaches, they're life coaches, they're spiritual coaches, they're women who really feel deeply that they are here to usher in a new earth. And so if you're one of those women, then you're in the right place. So what I want to talk to you today about are some of the childhood wounds that have really affected so many of us women in this collective, this divine feminine collective. We have a lot of childhood wounds, it seems. I think we called that in purposely so that we could be more empathic and have a deeper heart for others. However, on the flip side, it's holding a lot of us back. And so that's what I want to talk to you about today. That's why I believe this is really important. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story and why I feel like it's really important. But today we're going to specifically talk about the childhood wounds that many of us felt when we were a child. And I'm going to explain how that happens and what happens at that time. So many of us have blocked it out. So we kind of think we might have some wounds, but we don't understand how it happened and if it happened and how it's affecting us today. So I want you to understand that more today. And I'm going to specifically talk about worthiness, okay? Worthiness. So as it relates to our early childhood life, many of us had parents who were not highly attuned, and they really probably had a lot of trauma running from their own childhood that they didn't resolve before they became our parents. Understandably so, and we don't need to blame or shame them for the ways that they didn't provide what we should have gotten. There's really no point in that right now. We can definitely feel the grief of it and feel the pain of it, and that's a really important part of the healing. But this is not about, like blaming or shaming them. This is just about acknowledging where we didn't get met as a child and how that's affecting us today. Does that make sense? Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of likes, so thank you. So what I really want to talk about, I'm gonna look at my notes here, is how it begins, okay? So many of us can have very slight trauma or slight wounds to very extreme trauma and extreme wounds. And what I'm gonna talk to you about today are just kind of the basics, and then you can sort of start to have your own experience of what happened for you, okay? So many of us, okay, my own story, let's start there, right? I grew up in, and I'm gonna actually start more recently. I've built a multi six-figure business, and I've been a coach for 6 years, and I've been selling high-end coaching for 3 years and teaching other women how to sell high-end for just over 3 years. And what happened to me a couple of years ago was that I built a $500,000 business, and then I burnt out and I really didn't understand what happened. I really didn't understand what was happening at the moment. And so what I discovered through my healing journey that I will share over the next 3 days is that I had a lot of wounds that were running in the background, and I was totally bypassing them. I was using mindset or spiritual work to completely bypass the wounds that were living in my body. And this is what I see as an epidemic in the personal development and spiritual development world, is so many of us are bypassing our emotional realities, and it's a really bad thing because it catches up with us eventually, and we actually can't sustain the growth that we're after, the fulfillment that we're after, the success that we're after. We can't sustain it if we haven't integrated the wounds. They will come up and they will rear their ugly head, which is what happened to me. And it's all good. I think actually it was leading me toward having a deeper understanding of it so that I could teach it, because that's what I'm here to do. And so now in our business programs, we not only teach a 7-figure, like how to lead women to scale to a 7-figure company around their body of work and taking their leadership to the next level. We don't just talk about strategy or even mindset, all of which are really important, but we hold containers for the wounds, the inner child wounds that are gonna come up inevitably, and they need to be held, and they need to be tended to, and they need to be attuned to in order for them to not, self-sabotage, okay? So that's what's really important, and we're probably the only business program out there that are doing that right now. So that's a little bit of my story most recently. What happened to me as a child was that I just had 2 parents who were in a lot of drama themselves, right? And when I look back, I think they were pretty much children trying to raise children. They weren't emotionally mature at all. And so I was the oldest, and out of 2, so I had a younger brother, and I definitely took on the role of trying to parent my parents because I didn't feel safe. So one of the things that I, started to do as a child was start to take over and sort of run point for my family to try to keep me safe, my brother safe, and even my parents safe. So I grew up very quickly and sort of became a parent. And my parents allowed me to do that because they didn't really know that that was happening. But I'm what, a lot of psychologists, psychotherapists would say, I'm a parentified child. And there's long-lasting effects to being a parentified child, because if you didn't have parents that were highly attuned to you and your needs and your feeling of safety, then you actually never feel safe, because as a child, you are not prepared to be a parent, to run point, to figure out what's safe, what's not safe. Are we going to be fed? Is dad going to come home drunk? Is there going to be a fight? Like, these were all the things that I was tracking as a 4-year-old, as a 5-year-old, as an 8-year-old, and that's not something that a child should. So there are long-lasting effects to this. Individually, then later, my dad, my parents got divorced, my dad wasn't really present, and my mom is quite narcissistic, which is actually very common when people have unhealed emotional wounds. Those of us who have unhealed emotional wounds actually can, we fall on both sides of the spectrum of being empathic and narcissistic. And the reason is narcissists we call them narcissists. There's a spectrum of narcissism, right? But like slight narcissism is self-centeredness, of wanting the world to revolve around you. And, so interestingly, as a child, when we don't get our needs met, then we actually start to attune toward everyone else to get our needs met. And I'll explain more about that in a minute. But when we grow up into adulthood, we actually start to expect things to just go our way. We become self-centered because it's the only way that we've been demonstrated how to love. And so our parents demonstrated that, and then we actually in turn sort of expect that, if that makes sense. So we have these things running, right? We have these moments in our life where when our parents weren't attuned to us and we didn't feel that deep sense of safety, then we have long-lasting effects to how this shows up for us in our business, in our relationships, and in our money life, okay? So for me, what happened is I started to, my mom was sort of like very self-centered, and I grew up also way before my time being sort of her companion. She overshared with me a lot of her issues, a lot of her worries about what was going on, and it was just very, I didn't know it at the time, but I sort of like, you know, had to grow up and like live at an adult level. This is quite a trauma. And so I share this with you because a lot of people, and for me included, I used to think that trauma meant like you had to have physical trauma, you had to have sexual trauma, and that's actually not true. I mean, those are definite traumas, but these emotional traumas are legit. Like, they are serious, girlfriend. And the cool thing is, though, once we take a look at them, and once we see them, and once we know that they're there, and once we learn how to heal them, which I'm going to talk to you about today, then they can heal. And then we can like soar forward. And it's really amazing what happens. What I'm seeing with my clients now that we've integrated this work as they grow their business, it's just incredible to me how much change we see. And it's not from them pushing through. It's actually coming from this deep sense of worth and calling. And they're free. Like, they are free. It's amazing. So that's a little bit of my background. I'll probably share more of it as we go through the next 3 days. I'll share more of it as I go through some of today's content, just to demonstrate and like help you understand. And so I want you to sort of understand what happens then. Let me move on to fragmentation. So what happens is when you have something like this happen. So for me, for example, at 5, my parents were, you know, like not very stable. They were fighting a lot. I was already feeling like it's not safe. I got to protect everyone. I got to protect my mom from my dad. I got to protect my brother from my parents. And so I was sort of like doing all this work. At that point, I have fragmentation. So when you have a trauma, there's a part of you that actually doesn't grow up. Because the trauma was so significant, and you may not even remember it at this time, you will have moments of, you will have fragmentation. So essentially this is where at 5, I have pieces of me, even still right now, that I'm growing up because she didn't grow up past that age. It's almost like she stopped, because it was too much to process. It was too much for the 5-year-old to process. And so the brain actually could not process what was happening. And so literally go into disassociation and numbing out. And that part of me, when triggered, even today, it's less so today because I've done so much work on this. But some years ago, if it's triggered, I become 5 again. And that's sort of how you can want something. You can want a business. You can want greater wealth. You can want to have more leadership. You can want to write a book. You can want to speak on stage. You can want to give your gifts. And yet somehow it's not happening. You procrastinate and you resist and you hide and you don't take action. And this is the little one of you that does not feel safe. She doesn't feel safe. And so she like throws a tantrum. And she's like, no, we're not doing that. We're not doing that because that doesn't feel safe. And most of the time you don't know that this is happening. Most of you won't know. That's why we're here. That's why I'm sharing this with you, because I want there to be more awareness. So what I'm saying is your chronological age, to some degree, for every one of you, it's going to be different, will be stunted, okay? Will be stunted, and you don't even realize it. So sometimes you're a 30-year-old woman or a 40-year-old woman or a 50-year-old woman, especially when you're like, I got my vision, I know where I'm going, I know what my goals are, like, I'm good, I'm so excited, I can see it, this is what I'm here for, I know it, but like, you don't do it, right? Like there's like days that go by or you just find other things to do and yet like you're wondering why it's not happening. That's the time when you go back to little girl, you know, and you're not even aware, like you're not even aware. So what she's trying to do is get her needs met. Because that's what little girls do. That's what little children do. That's the capacity they have. They don't have the capacity to hold space for all the feelings and all the goals and all the actions and all the things that an adult can. A child can only focus on like basic needs, right? Love, affection, safety, security, being dry, feeling like being hungry, getting food. And so this is so important to understand that the little girl of you is like, we're not safe, we're not safe, we're not safe, we're not safe. If you do that post, we're not safe. If you go on video, we're not safe. If you charge $5,000, we're not safe, okay? So if you're not doing it, even though part of you feels like you can do it, that's why. So to get our needs met, when we were a little child, we actually learned to orient toward other people. So for me, in my example, to be love and to feel safe to like the degree that I needed, right? Like I just needed like a basic form of safety. It wasn't inherently safe, but I was just trying to find safety. To feel safe, I learned to please my parents, right? I learned that I needed to be a good girl and do what they say and kind of run point. Because my mom would be like, good girl, that's so awesome. Thank you so much for doing that and for helping me and all of that. So I learned that to get love, I needed to please my mom and I needed to please my dad and I needed to please my brother. I needed to be the good girl. I needed to be the overachiever. I need to like do well in school. And that's when I would get love. And this is unfortunately what parents with unresolved trauma do, is they really don't understand how to attune to the inherent value of their child. So they, you know, pat them on the head and the back for their behavior or their performance instead of their inherent value. And this happens even if there's no trauma. It's sort of like, this is a kind of trauma, but this is even in parents who, you know, just kind of are good, stable family, but they don't understand this piece. And so when we learn to get love by orienting toward other people, we grow up into adults who learn to get love by pleasing other people. And the only way that we feel love and worthiness is by pleasing other people. So guess what happens when we don't please other people, when we charge them what they think is too much, or when we make a post that, you know, might cause some conflict and someone kind of hates on it, or like the risks we take for being visible, for claiming our value and our worth. What do you think happens when our wound inside says, I'm only valuable when the other person loves me? When the other person sees my worth, when the other person values me. I'm only worthy when that happens. And if that doesn't happen, that means that I'm bad. And this is something that we can psychologically, intellectually understand is bullshit, and our inner child does not get that. You understand? So like for years, I understood the mindset around worthiness of like, just affirm yourself that you're worthy. And like, of course it's bullshit that other people don't like equate my value. But inside, it still rocked me. It still rocked me and I didn't understand why, right? I'd like have spurts of being out in the world and then I'd go back into a cave. It's like what some people call a vulnerability hangover, because we don't have the capacity to handle being that much open and seen and being visible out there. All right? So this is how self-abandonment happens, because essentially what we're doing when we've learned to orient out, no fault of our own, we are abandoning ourselves. we're not listening to ourselves, we're not following our heart, we're not following our intuition, we're not able to, because it's clouded by, I need to feel safe. The little girl in you that's like, we're not safe, I don't feel secure, I don't like this feels risky. She's running the show. She's running the show. And so the reality is, in that process, we learn to self-abandon, to feel love. And this is the recipe for never feeling fulfilled. We can't have boundaries if we self-abandon. We can't speak truth to power if we self-abandon. We can't have intimacy or relationships if we self-abandon. We can't have money if we self-abandon. And so the important piece here is that we have to build the relationship back with ourselves. There's nothing else to do except how to heal self-abandonment is to start becoming really attuned to yourself, which is a process, because no one taught you how to have a relationship with yourself. If you're like me, my parents learned, or taught me through my behavior and the way that they reciprocated, was that my value was based on how well I performed or what I did for them or how I behaved. And so I didn't, at that time when I first started this work, didn't understand how to listen to my own drum and follow my own feeling and deeply trust my own truth. So what I really want you to do is, if you've been resisting your work in the world, resisting what you know you should be doing to build your leadership company, if you've been charging lower than you know that you're worth, which is really not a concept I align with, but you'll probably understand what I'm saying. If you have been procrastinating and you've been shitting on yourself for it, I really want you to stop it, okay? Because you're not bad. You're not bad. You're not bad. You're not a bad girl. You're not a failure. You're not any of those things because you're not taking action, okay? It's only because the little girl in you just wants to feel safe, okay? And so the only way through those behaviors that are essentially the ways that you're self-abandoning today, by procrastinating, resisting, not taking action, not building your company, you are self-abandoning by not taking the steps, but it's okay. The only way to get there is through the relationship to yourself. It's not pushing through. You cannot push through, okay? You can't mindset affirm, spiritually bypass your way to taking the steps that you know you need to take. It's actually through building the relationship back with yourself. Let me take a breath. So women with these wounds, all the wounds I've been talking about, they find it really difficult to be visible, to speak truth, to set boundaries for fear of criticism. And a lot of us grew up with hypercritical parents. My mom was super hypercritical, hypercritical as and so it causes many of us women in this Divine Feminine Collective to be stuck in comparison mode, constantly looking at what other people are doing and comparing ourselves to them and what they're offering and how much they're charging and how much training they have and what their certifications are, which is the opposite of feeling confident, right? And believing in yourself. And this again stems from the wound. Because there's no truth to that. You're inherently good. But you see, when you focus on the things that you think make you worthy, because that's how you were trained by your parents, You will never feel worthy. Like, it's a never-ending list that you will never feel good enough. You'll never feel pretty enough. You know, like, you'll never feel skinny enough. You'll never feel powerful enough. You'll never feel, you're never going to feel it, no matter what you do, because you were trained to look at yourself through that lens, and you were reciprocated by your parents with love and affection by the way you looked, the way you performed, and the way you behaved. So now it's time for you to heal that piece, to come into relationship with that little girl in you that is still like screaming. She's either silently cowering in the closet, right? Or she's screaming. And she probably does both sometimes. And all that I'm talking about, guys, I'm talking about it in the lens of business and money, but like, you can relate this to your intimate relationships as well. The other piece that I want to share with you before I go on to like, what do we do about this is, you know, like for me personally, my parents weren't all bad, right? I went to private school. I always had food. I always was clothed. I had really nice clothes. We had a nice house. I grew up in the suburbs of New York City and Connecticut. And so like, we were middle class, and I, from the outside, didn't feel like, you know, there was any trauma. So I feel like it's important to say that, because a lot of people feel like, you know, trauma means X, like this terrible, terrible, terrible situation. And, you know, like mine was pretty terrible, and it's all relative. So sometimes my parents felt really good to me, and sometimes they felt really bad to me. So what happens there is that we actually develop this fragment piece where the love and affection we're trying to get, which is also like the money relationship, is sometimes good and sometimes bad. Is sometimes you love this person or this thing that you want, and sometimes you hate it. Sometimes they're your enemy. And this is a kind of relationship that many of us who, like, there were times my parents were awesome and were safe and were happy and I felt safe. And then there were times where they were also my enemy. And this is a very significant trauma to have in your life, when the only people who can take care of you, right? You're totally vulnerable as a child. You cannot take care of yourself. You cannot feed yourself. You don't have money, right? You can't house yourself. So you are completely vulnerable upon these people, your caretakers. And if sometimes they're loving and sometimes they're like dangerous, as a 5-year-old or a 7-year-old or even a 2-year-old, you don't have the capacity to like hold both of those. So again, you have this piece that fragments because it becomes overloaded. Your child becomes overloaded with understanding this and taking this in and feeling like you could process it. You can't process it. You're like, what the fuck is happening? So I just want to say that, because that is also all relationships, and one of your relationships in this lifetime is with money and support. Your parents were also your support. So it's all embedded in the same thing. And when you don't have a good relationship with these kinds of caretaking that happened early, if it didn't happen well, then you also don't have a good relationship now with caretaking of like from the universe, for yourself, which is money. Okay? So the childhood imprints most common around money, children who have trauma around money, these are the 4 things that they mostly struggle with. One is there's not enough. They have this belief that there is not enough in the world, and that if I charge a lot, I'm taking away from someone. And so you hear a lot, if your language is like, it's not affordable, people can't afford that, this kind of thing, you believe in the limited resource of money. Many children feel unworthy, which is a lot of what we're talking about today. They inherently feel unworthy to receive money. They also have a very intense lack of belief in themselves and their skills. Again, back to hypercritical parents, parents who valued only our performance and our behaviors. We didn't actually develop a good relationship with our, with like our skills and what we're good at and to like really own it, you know? Somehow that just like didn't happen for us because we were both judged on our performance and hyper criticized for our performance. And then the last one is money is bad. So a lot of us had the belief or that money creates evil and greed, especially if there was some money problems in our family. So one of the points I want to make here is that the reason that this runs your life right now is because it's embedded in your nervous system. And it's neuroscience talks about how our brain and our gut, our nervous system that's all throughout our body is actually running the show. And so when we calibrated our nervous system to drama very early in life, you know, it's like there's fight or flight, there's lack of security, it's not really safe, I'm not really sure. That's what your nervous system knows. Also, you can think about this in relationships. You might be attracted to men or whomever you're relating with in intimate relationships with someone who's quite unavailable to meet your needs. And that feels comfortable. It actually feels like love because that's how our parents loved us. So our nervous system actually calibrates to something that feels comfortable, even if it's not what we want. And that's why we will continue to perpetuate poverty consciousness. And then epigenetics says that we also, if we have this in our generational lineage, we're also carrying that forth, okay? So our vibrational frequency, our auric frequency, those of you who have studied yoga and kundalini and energy fields, our energy is absolutely affected by unhealed trauma and wounds that are living in our body. And so it's unseen to us. It's actually like kind of invisible. We don't realize that it's there. We don't realize that it's happening, but it's actually running the show. But it's also attracting circumstances that keep perpetuating the same feeling so that you can heal it. It's actually divinely inspired, or in like it's a divine intelligence that's happening. If you find yourself in continuous relationships that are similar, where this man doesn't meet you in the way that you want to be met, it's because there's an unhealed wound that you have an opportunity to look at and heal. And you will keep attracting the same thing. And this is not a shame conversation. This is not blaming you. This is not, telling you that it's your fault. It's actually really self-empowering because you realize that you can actually take the power and heal it. It's the same with money, and it's the same with your business. So if you keep having the same conversations with the same kind of clients, or you keep procrastinating, or you keep avoiding, then you know that it's really just a wound that's there. And your higher self is actually calling you forth to do the healing so that, you can integrate it. It's not one day you're unhealed and the next day you're healed. You actually start to begin to integrate the wound into your being. It's like, come on, okay, let's work together, instead of like, no, I don't see you, stop it. And that's when it becomes power, okay? That's when it becomes power. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about, finally, let's see how long, oh my God, I've already been talking for a while. Just want to talk to you a little bit about how to heal, okay? And then I'm going to give you a business challenge. So I'm going to just take a sip. All right, so here's 3 things today for starting to work with the worthiness wound and self-abandonment. So one is to just start to acknowledge and begin to understand. So if you've watched this and you're starting to get light bulbs and you're starting to carve new pathways of like understanding, that's what I want. I don't want you to stay in intellectualizing, but I know how much power there is in letting this come in and sort of letting your higher self even show you what's been invisible to you, what's ready to be integrated. And just starting to understand what may have happened to you as a child that maybe you forgot, and beginning to hold space for that, just with some compassion, hold space. All right. So number 2 then is to start to develop a relationship with that little girl of you that is trying to get your attention. In psychotherapy or psychology, we call it this process of reparentifying yourself. And we'll talk more about that in the coming days in the challenge. But and all of my clients know we help them with this process as they grow their business with strategy. But it is the process of starting to begin to have a relationship with that little one of you that is trying to get her needs met. Okay? And one thing, I'm going to share this with you as it relates to the business stuff, but one thing that you can just do throughout the day is put your hand on your heart and take a deep breath. And ask her if there's something she needs right now, or if there's something that she wants to say about it. So it might be that I tend to feel the energy in my chest when my early childhood wounds are coming up. It's really around my heart and my chest. Many of us are heartbroken, in fact, from our parents. And so the energy stays there. And I still feel it to this day when I'm triggered or when something comes up, or even when I'm not even realizing it, but there's something that wants to come through. And so there's so much power in just turning toward it. So that's the hand on the heart and the breath. And then just maybe asking a question and trusting the answer. Like trusting that she's there and she actually has something to say. So if you're worried about money, she might be like, I'm worried about the money. I don't know if we're safe. Are we safe? Are we safe? It's like she's talking to you like you're her mom. And now it's time, actually, like you're not going to get your mom to do what she should have done before, but it's time for you to start to, take her in your arms and say, it's okay. Like, I got this. I got it. And I'm doing it. Okay? So there's so much power in this. And then, number 3 is the breath and the movement actually I didn't say number 3. So number 3 is somatic healing. So I want you to bring your body into it. And so that's like taking another breath and then potentially doing movement. I do sensual embodied dance. Like I just literally turn on a song in my house and I move. I move however I want to move. It usually has a sensual flair where I want to move the pieces of my body, like my chest open. I want to open my hips. I want to circle my hips. And it usually just has this loving myself and my body flair to it. So I highly advise if you can bring any movement into this relationship, like this deeper relationship back with yourself, that is really powerful because you'll actually start to move this energy through your body. Okay, then as it relates to business, I want you to think about what is it right now that you're most afraid of? Like, is it being visible? Is it making an offer? Is it putting yourself out there in another way? Is it what is it right now? The number one thing that you keep procrastinating on that you're most afraid of? It could be something that feels just beyond your reach. Like you just haven't been able to get there. So example would be believing that your high-end program is enough and that you can charge $5,000 for it. And it's understanding that it's around your belief in yourself. It's actually not your program, it's you. It's the power that you have to facilitate transformation and beginning to deeply trust you. So I just want you to sit with that. But tomorrow we'll talk a little bit more about taking some more business action, but just sitting with what is it right now that you feel like you're really afraid of, that's just beyond your reach, and you're really procrastinating on and you're not taking action. And spend some time, maybe ask your inner little girl, what is she afraid of? What is she afraid of? Contrary to other business programs, I'm not interested in telling you just to go and do it. Anyway, all right? I want you to become friends with it. I want you to build a relationship with the peace. So if you notice that you resist, you procrastinate, you're confused, you're comparing yourself, all these things, I want you to, instead of being like, I shouldn't do that, I know I shouldn't do that, I'm kind of like bad for doing that, I should be doing better, I should be taking action, I should, like all that is just, you're actually re-traumatizing yourself. So the first step is to start to bring more compassion to yourself and love to yourself, like the love and compassion that you didn't get as a child, and understand why that's happening. It's happening for a reason. You're not trying to be bad, okay? You're procrastinating because you're trying to get a need met that's not being met right now. And the sooner that you turn toward it and you work with it, you can meet the need, you can build a relationship with it, and that's when my clients see that they can hold the trauma still, right? It doesn't just go away overnight, but they start to feel the momentum. They start to feel the natural gravity of wanting to do their work and to take the steps and to, be out there. The things that they were resisting start to open up. And this is how it happens in an embodied way. The bonus to all of this, when you do this, since you're all coaches, is that you're going to be able to facilitate these kinds of transformations for your clients too. Because no matter what you're coaching, everyone has this stuff going on, and you can't just tell someone, just do it anyway. Just go and do it, because deeply underneath it all, like we're all just trying to get a need met, feel safe, feel loved, feel secure. And so I just want you to turn toward her and just start building a relationship. And I promise you, what changes in your self-worth will be beyond what you ever thought imaginable. What you start to feel relating to your worthiness will absolutely transform your life when you start doing this. Thank you so much for being here. Okay, I'm going to open it up if there were any questions. Let me see here on my, I told you guys in the beginning that I was just gonna channel and go for it when I started talking. So I know some of you had some comments, but I didn't acknowledge them because I wanted to just stay in my flow, but I will now. Not sure who is still here. Andrea said, this is just crazy. Aha moments galore. Yes, powerful to share this. Tara, goes straight to my heart. Thank you so much. I'm so glad. I can't see other comments here for some reason. Is there any other comments? Any other things that you want to say? Lots more people wanting to join the group. It's so weird. I'm here in my Facebook group looking at the comments and it says there are 13 comments, but it's only showing me 4 comments. Oh no, guys. Oh, Andrea, this has been amazing. Thank you. Thank you for being here. I'm so glad. I'm so glad. I love talking about this stuff, and I'm super excited that you were here and that you could experience it live. Thank you for the hearts. Anything else? Any other comments? I'm just trying to see here. It's honestly not letting me see the comments. So if you're listening still and you haven't popped off, put any comments or questions in the comments section below, and I will check back later. And I will be back tomorrow at the same time. We're gonna dive a little bit deeper. Thank you so much for being here.